The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember because I was staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep, already knowing something was wrong with my marriage but not yet knowing how wrong. Mrs. Harrison? This is Margaret Caldwell from Caldwell and Associates. I'm calling about your Aunt, Catherine Montgomery. My heart sank. Aunt Catherine had been more than family. She'd been my mentor, my confidant, the one person who truly understood me. Is she? I'm so sorry, Mrs. Harrison. She passed peacefully in her sleep last night, but she left specific instructions for me to contact you immediately. Can you come to our office today? There are urgent matters regarding her estate that require your immediate attention. I went alone. My husband, Derek, had barely looked up from his laptop when I told him. That's rough, babe, he'd mumbled, eyes still on the screen. Your aunt was loaded, right? Maybe she left you something nice. The callousness in his voice made my stomach turn, but I pushed it aside. Derek had been distant for months, working late, taking mysterious phone calls, coming home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. But I'd been in denial, making excuses, convincing myself I was being paranoid. Margaret Caldwell's office was all mahogany and leather, old money and discretion. She was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a kind smile. Your aunt thought very highly of you, Emma, she said, sliding a folder across her desk. She wanted to make sure you were taken care of. I opened the folder, and my world tilted. $5 million. Plus the beach house in Malibu, the apartment in Manhattan, and a collection of rare books worth another $1 million at least. I don't understand, I stammered. Why me? She had other family. She specified that you were the only one who truly cared about her for who she was, not what she had. And she left you a letter. Margaret handed me a cream-colored envelope with my name written in Aunt Catherine's elegant script. My hand shook as I opened it. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't cry too long for me. I've lived a full, rich life, and I'm ready for whatever comes next. I'm leaving you my estate because you're the only one who visited me because you wanted to, not because you hoped to be mentioned in my will. You're the only one who asked about my day, who brought me books we could discuss, who saw me as Catherine, not as a bank account. But I need to warn you about something. Money changes people. It brings out the worst in those around you. Be careful who you trust. Especially Derek. I never liked him, darling. I know you love him, but I've seen the way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching, like you're an obstacle, not a partner. Please be careful. Protect yourself. And remember, you're worth so much more than he'll ever deserve. Use this money to build the life you deserve. Be brave. Be free. All my love, Aunt Catherine. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Aunt Catherine had seen what I'd been too afraid to admit, that my marriage was failing, that Derek had changed, that something was terribly wrong. Mrs. Harrison? Margaret's voice was gentle. Are you all right? She warned me about my husband. She did. Several times, actually. She came to me 6 months ago to update her will and asked me to include a clause. The inheritance is yours alone. It cannot be claimed as marital property. She was very specific about protecting you. Smart, careful Aunt Catherine. Even from beyond the grave, she was taking care of me. I left the lawyer's office in a daze, clutching the folder to my chest. $5 million. A beach house. An apartment in Manhattan. And a warning about my husband. I decided not to tell Derek right away. Something in Aunt Catherine's letter, something in my gut, told me to wait, to watch, to see how he'd react. That decision probably saved my life. For the next week, I acted normal. I went to my job at the museum, came home, made dinner, played the role of the dutiful wife. But I was watching Derek with new eyes. And what I saw terrified me. He was on his phone constantly, texting someone. His face lighting up with a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. He'd slip out of rooms to take calls. He'd started going to the gym 5 nights a week, coming home showered and smelling like cologne. On Friday night, a week after Aunt Catherine's death, I followed him. I know it was a violation of privacy, a breach of trust. But my marriage was already broken, and I needed to know the truth. Derek's gym was actually a sleek apartment building in downtown Seattle. I watched from my car as he walked in. Not with a gym bag, but with flowers and a bottle of wine. 30 minutes later, I was still sitting there when a woman appeared in the third-floor window. Young, maybe 25. Beautiful, with long blonde hair and a figure that made my 38-year-old body feel ancient. She kissed Derek and he pulled her close, his hands running through her hair with a tenderness he hadn't shown me in years. I drove home on autopilot, my hands shaking on the wheel. When I got there, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the dark thinking. Derek was having an affair. Aunt Catherine had been right. But it was more than that. Derek had been pulling away from me for exactly 6 months, right around the time Aunt Catherine had changed her will. Had he somehow known? Had he realized he wasn't going to get his hands on her money through me? I needed answers. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Rachel Chun who came highly recommended. I gave her everything: Derek's schedule, his phone number, the address of the apartment building. "I'll have a full report in 2 weeks, she promised. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I played the loving wife while Derek lied to my face. Every "I love you" felt like poison. Every kiss felt like betrayal. The night before Rachel was supposed to deliver her report, Derek suggested we go out for dinner. "I've been neglecting you," he said, actually looking guilty. "Let me take you somewhere nice. Wear that blue dress I love." I should have been happy. Instead, alarm bells were ringing in my head. But I went. I wore the dress. I let him drive us to an expensive restaurant overlooking the water. Dinner was strange. Derek was attentive, charming, the man I'd fallen in love with 7 years ago. He held my hand, told me I was beautiful, talked about planning a vacation together. "I know I've been distant," he said, his eyes sincere. "Work has been crazy. But you're what matters most to me, Emma. You know that, right?" I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. We left the restaurant around 10. Derek insisted on driving, waving away my offer to take the wheel. "You had wine, babe. I've got this." We were heading home on the coastal highway, a winding road with a steep drop to the ocean on one side, when it happened. Derek slammed on the brakes. Nothing happened. "Emma," his voice was panicked. "The brakes, they're not working." We were picking up speed, heading straight for a hairpin turn that would send us plummeting into the Pacific. "Use the emergency brake," I screamed. "It's not working either." Time slowed down. I could see the guardrail approaching, could imagine us smashing through it, falling, dying in the cold water below. And then I saw Derek's face. He wasn't looking at the road. He was looking at his door, his hand on the handle, calculating. He was going to jump. He was going to save himself and leave me to die. "You bastard!" I shrieked, grabbing the wheel. I yanked it hard to the left, aiming for the mountainside of the road instead of the ocean. We hit the rock wall at 40 miles per hour, airbags deploying, metal crunching, glass shattering. Then everything went black. I woke up in the hospital with a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and a severely sprained wrist. But I was alive. Derek was in the bed next to mine, unconscious, his leg in a cast and his face covered in cuts. The police officer standing by my bed said he'd been lucky, just a broken femur and some lacerations. "Mrs. Harrison, can you tell me what happened?" I told him everything: the brakes failing, Derek trying to jump, me grabbing the wheel. The officer's expression grew grim. "Ma'am, the accident investigators found something. Your brake lines were cut. Not frayed, not worn, deliberately cut. This wasn't an accident. The room spun." "What? Someone tried to kill you. Or both of you. We need to know who might want to hurt you." I looked at Derek, still unconscious in the next bed, and a horrifying realization crashed over me. He'd insisted on driving. He'd been the one to suggest dinner on that specific road. He'd positioned himself to jump. Derek had tried to kill me. "I need to make a phone call," I said, my voice shaking. The officer nodded and left me alone. I called Rachel Chun. "Emma? I heard about the accident. Are you okay?" "Rachel, I need your report now. All of it. I'm on my way to the hospital." She arrived 30 minutes later with a thick folder. Inside were photographs, bank records, phone logs, and enough evidence to paint a damning picture. Derek had been having an affair with Madison Pierce for 8 months. She was a pharmaceutical sales rep who'd met Derek at a conference. According to Rachel's investigation, Derek had been draining our joint savings account, funneling money to Madison. But it got worse. 3 weeks ago, Rachel said quietly. Derek took out a $2 million life insurance policy on you. He's the sole beneficiary. My blood ran cold. He was going to kill me for the insurance money. It looks that way, especially combined with the cut break lines. Emma, you need to go to the police with this. I will. But first I need to know. Did he know about my aunt's inheritance? Rachel pulled out another document. Your husband has been monitoring your email. I found spyware on your laptop. He's been reading everything, including the correspondence with your aunt's lawyer. So Derek knew. He knew I'd inherited $5 million. And he knew that thanks to Aunt Catherine's foresight, he couldn't touch it unless I died. The life insurance was just a bonus. The real prize was the inheritance. If I died as my husband, he'd contest the will, claim grief and emotional manipulation, tie up the estate in courts for years until he got a settlement. Derek had planned to murder me for money. I sat there staring at the evidence, feeling numb. The man I'd married, the man I'd loved, had tried to kill me. When Derek woke up 2 hours later, I was ready. Emma. His voice was groggy from the pain medication. Thank God you're okay. What happened? The brakes were cut, Derek. His eyes widened with fear or surprise, I couldn't tell. What? That's insane. Who would? You tell me. I kept my voice calm, detached. Who would want me dead? Emma, you're not making sense. You hit your head pretty hard. I know about Madison. The color drained from his face. I don't know what you're talking about. Madison Pierce. Pharmaceutical sales. Blonde, 25. Lives in that apartment downtown where you've been spending your evenings instead of at the gym. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Emma, I can explain. I know about the life insurance policy too. $2 million with you as the beneficiary. Taken out 3 weeks ago. Now he looked genuinely terrified. That was just, we needed better coverage. And I know you've been reading my emails. That you know about Aunt Catherine's inheritance. Silence. Derek stared at me, and for the first time I saw him clearly. Not as my husband, not as the man I loved, but as what he really was. A predator who'd seen an opportunity. You tried to kill me, I said quietly. For $5 million and a life insurance payout. You're crazy, he spat. You can't prove any of this. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo Rachel had taken, Derek and Madison at a hardware store. Derek purchasing exactly the kind of wire cutters that could cut brake lines. 2 days before our dinner date, I said. Want to explain that? His face went from pale to gray. I want a lawyer. Good idea. You're going to need one. The police arrested Derek that afternoon. His hospital bed became his jail cell, an officer posted outside his door. The investigation moved quickly. The wire cutters were found in Derek's car, still with traces of brake fluid. Madison Pierce, when questioned, broke down and admitted Derek had told her he was planning to divorce me, that we had no money, that she was his future. She hadn't known about the murder plot, or so she claimed, but she had known he was married and hadn't cared. Derek's lawyer tried to claim the brake line cutting was an accident, that Derek had been checking the car's condition. But the evidence was overwhelming. The life insurance policy, the spyware on my computer, the systematic draining of our accounts, the affair, the wire cutters, and the fact that he'd tried to jump from the car while I crashed. The prosecutor offered me a deal, testify against Derek, and they'd push for attempted murder charges with a sentence of 25 years to life. I took it. The trial was a media circus. Husband tries to kill wife for $5 million inheritance, screamed the headlines. My face was everywhere. Derek's mugshot next to it. Madison crying on camera about how she'd been deceived. I became a symbol. The woman who'd survived her husband's greed, who'd fought back and won. People stopped me on the street to share their own stories of betrayal, to thank me for being brave enough to testify. But I didn't feel brave. I felt broken. The man I'd loved, the man I'd built a life with, had tried to murder me. How do you come back from that? How do you ever trust again? Derek was sentenced to 30 years in prison. No parole for at least 20. When the verdict was read, he looked at me across the courtroom, and I saw not remorse but rage. You ruined my life, he shouted as they led him away. That money should have been ours. Not I'm sorry. Not I was wrong. Just anger that his plan had failed. That's when I knew I'd made the right choice. That's when I knew Aunt Catherine had been right all along. Rebuilding took time. I sold the house I'd shared with Derek. Too many memories, too much pain. I bought a modest condo near the museum where I worked, something small and safe and entirely mine. The inheritance sat in a trust, managed by Margaret Caldwell. I didn't touch most of it for the first year. It felt tainted like blood money that had nearly cost me my life. But slowly I started to heal. I went to therapy. I joined a support group for domestic violence survivors because that's what I realized. Derek's attempt on my life had been the culmination of years of subtle manipulation and control. I'd just been too close to see it. On the 1-year anniversary of the accident, I visited Aunt Catherine's grave. "You saved my life," I told the headstone. "If you hadn't protected that inheritance, if you hadn't warned me, I'd be dead. Thank you." I like to think she heard me. That afternoon I made a decision. I was going to use the money the way Aunt Catherine would have wanted, to help people, to make a difference, to turn something terrible into something good. I started a foundation for domestic violence survivors, focusing on women trying to escape dangerous relationships. We provided legal assistance, safe housing, job training, therapy. Everything I'd needed and more. I called it the Catherine Montgomery Foundation for Survivors. In the first year, we helped 50 women leave abusive situations. In the second year, 200. By year 5, we'd expanded to 6 cities and helped over 1,000 women rebuild their lives. Each one of them was a victory. Each one was proof that Derek hadn't won, that his greed and violence hadn't destroyed me. I became a public speaker, sharing my story at conferences and fundraisers. It was terrifying at first, standing in front of crowds and reliving the worst moments of my life. But every time a woman came up to me afterward, tears in her eyes, telling me I'd given her the courage to leave, it was worth it. 3 years after Derek's conviction, I met someone new. His name was James, and he was a trauma therapist who volunteered at the foundation. He was gentle, patient, everything Derek hadn't been. Our first date, I told him everything about Derek, about the accident, about the trial. I expected him to run. Instead, he took my hand. "Thank you for trusting me with your story. And I want you to know, I'm not him. I will never be him. If you want to take this slow, we'll take it slow. If you need space, I'll give you space. You set the pace." We took it very slow. It was 2 years before I felt ready to move in together, another year before he proposed. "I know marriage is complicated for you," he said, kneeling in the living room of our shared apartment. "And if you don't want to get married, that's okay. I love you regardless. But if you're willing to try again, I promise to spend every day proving that not all husbands are like Derek." I said yes. We had a small wedding, just close friends and family. No expensive venue, no elaborate ceremony. Just 2 people promising to love and honor each other. For real this time. And James kept his promise. Every single day he showed me what real love looked like. What partnership meant. What it felt like to be seen, valued, cherished. Derek, meanwhile, rotted in prison. I heard through the prosecutor that he'd tried to appeal his sentence twice, both times denied. Madison had moved to another state, changed her name, tried to disappear from the scandal. I didn't care. They were my past. James and the foundation and the life I was building, that was my future. 5 years after the accident, I received a letter from Derek. The prison had forwarded it to my lawyer, who'd called to ask if I wanted to read it. "He doesn't have your current address," she assured me, "and he can't contact you directly. But he wrote this and asked that it be delivered. You don't have to read it if you don't want to." I almost said no, but curiosity won out. "Emma, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to respond to this letter. But I needed to write it anyway. I'm sorry. For all of it. For the affair, for trying to kill you, for everything I put you through. There's no excuse for what I did. I was greedy, selfish, and cruel. Prison has given me a lot of time to think. About who I was, who I became, what I threw away. I had a good woman who loved me, and I destroyed that because I wanted money more than I wanted a life with you. I've been in therapy here, trying to understand why I did it, why I thought I could get away with it. The therapist says I have narcissistic personality disorder, that I've always seen people as tools to get what I want rather than as human beings. That doesn't excuse anything. But maybe it explains some of it. I heard about your foundation, about the women you're helping, about the life you're building. I'm glad you survived. I'm glad you didn't let what I did destroy you. I'll spend the rest of my life in here, and I deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Even if it doesn't matter, even if it's too little too late. I'm sorry, Emma. For all of it. Derek. I read the letter 3 times, waiting to feel something. Anger, sadness, satisfaction. But all I felt was empty. Do you want to write back? My lawyer asked. No, I said. There's nothing left to say. I burned the letter that night, watching the paper curl and blacken in my fireplace. Derek was gone from my life in every way that mattered. His apology, his regret, his therapy, it was all irrelevant. What mattered was the life I'd built, the women I'd helped, the love I'd found, the person I'd become. 10 years after inheriting Aunt Catherine's fortune, I stood at a podium in front of 500 people at our annual foundation gala. James sat in the front row, smiling up at me with pride. When my aunt left me her inheritance, I began. I thought it was just money, but it was so much more than that. It was a test, a challenge, a question. Who would I become when I had resources? My ex-husband thought it was an opportunity for greed. He tried to kill me for it. But he was wrong. Money isn't about greed, it's about choices. And I chose to honor my aunt's memory by helping others. These women are why I do this work. Every single one of them faced impossible situations. Abusive partners, no resources, nowhere to turn. And we helped them escape. We helped them rebuild. We showed them that they deserved better. The audience applauded, and I felt my throat tighten with emotion. My Aunt Catherine told me to be brave and be free. I'm honoring that every day. And I'm asking all of you to join me. Donate. Volunteer. Spread the word. Together, we can help even more women find their freedom. After the gala, James and I drove to the coast, to the spot where Derek had tried to kill me. It was the first time I'd been back since the accident. Are you okay? James asked, holding my hand. I am, I said, surprised to find it was true. This place used to haunt me. But now? It's just a road. He doesn't own it anymore. He doesn't own any part of my life. We stood there watching the waves crash against the rocks, the same rocks I'd steered into to save my life. I survived, I whispered. And I built something beautiful from the ashes. James kissed my temple. You did more than survive, Emma. You thrived. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and transformed it into hope for thousands of women. He was right. Derek had tried to destroy me, but instead he'd freed me. Freed me from a toxic marriage, from self-doubt, from fear. And Aunt Catherine's inheritance, the money Derek had tried to kill me for, had become the foundation of something truly meaningful. 15 years after the accident, I wrote a book about my experience. Breaks Cut. How I survived my husband's murder attempt and found freedom. It became a bestseller almost immediately. Women wrote to me from around the world, sharing their own stories of survival, of escape, of rebuilding. One letter stood out. It was from a woman named Sarah in Ohio. Dear Emma, I'm writing this from a motel room. I just left my husband of 12 years. Reading your book gave me the courage to leave. To pack a bag, take my kids, and walk out the door. I'm terrified. I have no idea what comes next. But I'm free. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for showing me that survival is possible. That I can rebuild. With gratitude, Sarah. I cried reading her letter. Then I had my assistant track Sarah down and offer her support from the foundation. Housing assistance, legal help, job placement. 6 months later, Sarah sent me a photo. She was smiling, standing in front of a small house with her 2 kids. Our new beginning, the caption read. Because of you. These moments made everything worthwhile. Every painful memory, every terrifying moment of the trial, every nightmare about brake lines failing. It all led to this. To helping women find their strength. Derek was still in prison. He'd be there for another 15 years at least. I'd heard through the grapevine that he'd become a model prisoner, teaching other inmates to read, working in the prison library. Good for him, I supposed. But I didn't think about him much anymore. He was a cautionary tale. A dark chapter in a story that had become so much more. 20 years after inheriting Aunt Catherine's fortune, I was 60 years old, happily married to James, running a foundation that had helped over 10,000 women escape domestic violence. The inheritance that Derek had tried to kill me for? I'd used almost all of it for the foundation. I kept enough to live comfortably to take care of my needs, but the rest went to helping others. Aunt Catherine would have been proud. I visited her grave on the anniversary of her death, like I did every year. I did it, I told the headstone. I used the money for good. I built something that matters. And I'm happy. Really truly happy. A butterfly landed on the headstone. A monarch, Aunt Catherine's favorite. I took it as a sign. She was still watching over me, still proud of the woman I'd become. That night, James and I hosted a small dinner party at our home. Friends from the foundation, women we'd helped who'd become advocates themselves, people who'd supported our mission. To Emma, one of them toasted. For taking tragedy and transforming it into triumph. To Aunt Catherine, I corrected, raising my glass. For seeing the danger I couldn't see, for protecting me even after death, and for teaching me that money is only as valuable as what you do with it. We drank, we laughed, we shared stories of survival and hope. Later, as I was cleaning up, I found myself looking at a photo on the mantel, me and Aunt Catherine at her beach house, both of us laughing at some long-forgotten joke. Thank you, I whispered to her image. For everything. For the money, yes. But more importantly, for believing in me. For warning me. For saving my life. Because that's what the inheritance really was, not $5 million, but a second chance. A chance to escape a man who would have killed me. A chance to build a life that mattered. A chance to help others find their own freedom. Derek had seen the inheritance as a prize to be won, even if it meant murder. I'd seen it as a responsibility to be honored. And in the end, that made all the difference. 25 years after the accident, I received an unexpected visitor at the foundation's headquarters. A young woman in her 20s with Derek's eyes and his dark hair. Mrs. Harrison? My name is Melissa. I'm Derek's daughter. From his first marriage. I'd known Derek had a child from before we met. A daughter he barely mentioned and never saw. But she stood before me now, nervous and determined. How can I help you? I asked gently. I wanted to meet you. To apologize for what my father did. I know it's not my responsibility, but I felt like I needed to say it anyway. You have nothing to apologize for. You didn't try to kill me. He did. I know. But I also wanted to thank you. She pulled out a well-worn copy of my book. I read this when I was 19. My boyfriend at the time was showing signs of being controlling, isolating me from friends, monitoring my phone, the same things you described your husband doing. What did you do? I left. Because of your book. Because you showed me what could happen if I stayed. You saved my life, Mrs. Harrison. Not literally like you saved your own, but you saved me from a future of abuse. Tears filled my eyes. I'm so glad you got out. I also wanted you to know, I don't talk to my father. Haven't since I found out what he did to you. He's tried to reach out from prison, but I refuse his calls. He doesn't deserve forgiveness. Not from you, not from me. That's your choice to make, I said carefully. And I support whatever decision you make about your relationship with him. Thank you. She hesitated. Can I ask you something? How did you forgive him? In the book you said you'd found peace. How? I thought about that question carefully. I didn't forgive him exactly. I forgave myself. For not seeing the signs sooner. For staying when I should have left. For trusting him when my gut told me not to. Once I forgave myself, his actions didn't have power over me anymore. Melissa nodded, understanding. That makes sense. And for what it's worth, I added. You seem like a wonderful young woman. You're nothing like your father. His choices don't define you. She smiled, tears in her eyes. Thank you. That means everything. After she left, I sat at my desk, thinking about the strange journey my life had taken. From a woman whose husband tried to kill her for money, to a woman who'd helped thousands of others escape similar fates. The $5 million Aunt Catherine left me wasn't just money. It was freedom. It was power. It was the means to transform pain into purpose. And I'd used every penny of it to do exactly that. So thank you, Aunt Catherine, for seeing what I couldn't see, for protecting me when I couldn't protect myself, for giving me the resources to not just survive, but to help others survive too. And Derek? He's still in prison, exactly where he belongs. His greed destroyed his life, not mine. I'm 65 now, happily married. Running a foundation that changes lives every day. I wake up every morning grateful to be alive, grateful for the second chance I almost didn't get. Because that's what surviving a murder attempt teaches you. Life is precious. Every moment is a gift. And when you get a second chance, you make it count. I made it count. And I'd do it all over again. The end.